Hello, this is Daryl Ehrlich, and this is Vietnam Voices, a project of the Billings Gazette sponsored by Master Lube. And today I'm excited to have in studio with us Ernie LaFountain. Ernie is interesting for a couple of reasons, and I'm not going to steal all of his thunder, but I'm going to tell you that it's interesting because up until this point we've had mostly folks who've been over there been to Vietnam for just one tour. Ernie was there for multiple tours, and he's also the brother of Jerry LaFountain, who we've also featured on this series. If you may remember, Jerry and now Ernie were one of four brothers. Did I get that right? To have gone to Vietnam out of the LaFountain family. I'm honored to have him in here, and I'm honored that he'd spent time. Thank you for being here, Ernie. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
So Ernie, you were in from 65 to 68, and then again from 70 on till 75. That's a lot of service. You saw a lot. Let's take you up before. Let's start back. We were talking a little before the cameras turned on. Let's talk about what you were doing before 1965 and how did you get into the Army?
Okay, I was working in Libby, Montana for the J. Neal's Lumber Company up there. And when I turned 18, I went down and I registered for the draft, which was the law at that time. Immediately thereafter, I was sent a pre-induction physical notice, and I went. I'm pretty sure it was Butte. I went down to Butte, and they examined me, and they classified me as a 1Y, and they sent me home. I had no idea what that classification was, so I called the draft board and I asked them, and they said that a 1Y qualification was the only level below it was 4F. And the reason for this was that the medical staff found a suspected hernia on me. Well, but they told me, the draft board told me that basically I was home free. Just forget about it.
You never get drafted.
I will never get drafted.
Okay.
So I just went on about my life, working in the woods, working my way up from a choker setter to the next one up, whose name I can't think of it. Anyway, the final goal was being to run a Pioneer dozer, which is the dozer that makes the initial roads into the new timber areas that we were going into. And I had worked my way up to where rigging man was the next step. And the senior rigging man, whenever a skid cat operator didn't show up, the senior rigging man was given that dozer for the day. And so I was running the dozer pretty steady. Or not the dozer, the skid cat. They were D8 cats. They didn't have, all they had was a big drawbar and what we called a stone boat, which, a big flat piece of steel that the front of the logs laid on to keep them from buckling in the dirt and stuff, to slide up over it, And we're using D8 cats, which some of the timber that I hauled out of there was 10 feet in diameter. Some of it, that kind of stuff, they cut in the woods, they cut it into 8-foot lengths. because if they cut it any longer, it was too heavy to haul. And we had oversized custom-built logging trucks, which were capable of carrying about twice the load of a legal highway tractor trailer. But it was.
So you're working, and then what? You're thinking, well, I'm just working here. This is good,
Yep.
good pay, good,
Yep.
right?
Having fun, you know,
Right.
a young teenager, you know, drinking, you know, chasing girls, you know, any, you know, young teenager. And this I learned later. But when when General Westmoreland decided that he needed more ground troops in Southeast Asia, the government was faced with a problem. The problem being that they had already drafted all of the young American boys who couldn't cause a political uproar. So they were faced with either taking away like college deferments and things like that, and or activating some of the National Guard. Both of these options had major pitfalls in them. So Robert McNamara, who was like the Secretary of Defense, I think,
He
at
was.
the time.
Yep.
Well, he figured out a solution that later on became, at least in the military, was called McNamara's 100,000. And what he did was they directed all local draft boards to recall all 1Y and the next two classes above it for re-examination. And by doing this, I walked into Spokane, Washington, into the draft physical clinic as a 1Y, and I walked out as a 1A. And while this really didn't disturb me, but what did disturb me is that when I got to Fort Ord for basic training, half of my basic training platoon was from Montana. The other half was from Seattle and Chicago. And we had 3 or 4 individuals, one of who was from, I think, Glendive, a little guy named Richard Lucas. And he had received a very low classification because of his mentality, his IQ. And he went in, he was called in, retook the physical, and had gained about 20 points on his IQ. So he became 1A. And he was just a wonderful little guy. But he was dumb as a rock.
And they were going to send him to basic and to war.
He was in my basic training platoon. We being the platoon, because the platoon worked together to solve problems. The DIs forced us to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if, you've probably heard the stories of the guys that wouldn't take a shower, and that eventually 5 or 6 guys would jump them and use lye soap and scrubbers that we scrubbed the floors with and stuff. We actually did that to one guy. Only had to do it once, and only had to do it to one guy. But if we didn't do it, he come out smelly, looking like a wino, a Skid Row, and the DIs would punish us for it. So we got the idea, but going back to little Lucas, he could not put his boots on the correct foot without supervision. If we let him put his boots on by himself, half the time they'd be on the wrong feet. So as a solution to that little problem, we painted a small white spot on the back of the heel of his left boot. And we wrote, R-O-T-E, repeatedly wrote him putting those boots on. White, black. And this worked for him. I have refused to think about if he went to Vietnam as an infantryman. I can't envision anything that he could be taught that would help him out. And I think that is one of the greatest travesties of the war. It is called McNamara's 100,000.
Right, and you went in. Let's. One of the things you brought a picture, and the picture is date. It's your boot camp class, and it's November 5th, 1965, and it's November 23rd, 2015. So it's pretty close, near 50 years to the day since you went in boot camp. So you go to boot camp, and then did you do AIT or any training, or tell me about that?
Well, I on my induction physical, it's also a mental process. They give you a bunch of tests, and I scored extremely high on all of them. The one that relates to a civilian IQ, mine was around 146, and about 2 weeks into the basic training, they called several of us into the company commander's office and told us that we were OCS qualified. That's Officer Candidate School. And I was one of them. and we were offered the chance to do that. And I thought about it and said, yeah, why not? So I signed up for it. Well, after we graduated from basic training, all of us who had signed up for the OCS program were held over. We didn't have orders. Well, there's, I don't know, 10 or 12 of us. Well, by the end of a week, there was one left without orders, me. And so I got to be an assistant drill instructor for the next month. And one day, here comes a set of orders to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, to the 27th Engineer, the 27th Combat Engineer Battalion, which, unknown to me at the time, this was the second push of the buildup of the last brigade of the 101st Airborne, and it was its second push in building up to go to Vietnam. So I went home on leave, and then I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. No AIT, no advanced individual training. When I went into the military, I could already run a dozer and a loader, and I could drive tractor trailers. And they assigned me to headquarters company, to the heavy equipment platoon, and the Sergeant Yazanowski evaluated me and put me to work basically as a truck driver and a dozer operator, and then later on he put me with a Spec 5 crane operator as his assistant, and I learned to pull the maintenance on the crane, and I also learned to run the crane. And about 5 or 6 months into my time there at Fort Campbell, we were ordered to load up all of our equipment, and there was a railroad yard in Fort Campbell there, and they would pull the trains in their flat cars, and we would load our equipment onto these flatbed railroad cars and scare them, tie them down, and they went to Mobile, Alabama, where they were loaded onto a ship. The first man that I actually saw die in the military, there were 3 of us. I was a private. Marty Milan was a Spec 4. He was a crane operator, and Wes was a Spec 5, married, 2 daughters, 2.5 months or so to go in the service. He was the tractor trailer driver, and we were in behind this set of buildings loading up connexes, which are large steel buildings or storage units. And we were loading them up, and we had, the safety ropes, because you don't touch, the metal. You have a safety rope, and up there, we're loading them, and we're loading our second connex, and the crane, it was one of the the friction type drums on it, and turns were all drums, and Marty pushed the lever to turn, and it hung up and stuck, and just like that. And the connex started swaying. Well, I was holding on my rope with all my power. I'm 6 feet tall, 210 pounds. And Wes is on the other side, and he just, for whatever reason, he reached up and touched the connex to try to stabilize it. Well, what we didn't know was the boom of the crane was in the power line.
So you already saw, before you even went for Vietnam, you already saw someone die.
Yes.
So then you were shipping out as a whole group, as a whole unit, the 27th,
Yes.
over to Vietnam. So you weren't necessarily, a lot of guys talk about going over as singles or individuals, but you're all going over there as a group?
Yes, we are.
So you went out, did you ship from Mobile and then around the Horn, or how did that work?
Well, it was kind of there were, our stuff was on the ship. There was a Cigna battalion whose stuff was on the ship, and then there was, I think, an MP outfit. And they designated 3 individuals to go on this cargo ship as overseers and, custodians of our equipment, make sure everything was, if anything broke loose, we were supposed to fix it, and so on and so forth, And they sent my lieutenant, the Spec 5 Keaton, a crane operator, who I was his assistant at the time, and they sent me. And we loaded up full battle gear, M14 rifles. We loaded up and got on a commercial bus and rode to Mobile, Alabama. And they put us in a hotel there, and we put our weapons and our gear on the ship and inspected it and everything, and then just for about a week we just hung around. And just, we didn't have much money or anything. We just walk around Mobile, and everything. That was my first confrontation with racism. Keaton and I we'd gotten up real early one morning for some reason. We couldn't sleep, and so we we're walking downtown, and here's this cafe and coffee shop. And we start to go in, and this colored gentleman says, excuse me. We turn, yeah. He said, could you please buy me a cup of coffee in there and bring it out to you? I will pay for it. And Keaton looked at us, well, why don't you just go in there and buy it yourself? He says, coloreds aren't allowed in there. And I mean, you know, I'm a Montana redneck. I was born and raised in Lewistown. You know, I've got a 10th grade education. You know, and I just, you know, I've got a lot of native intelligence, but I don't have a lot of book learning, and I don't have a lot of life experience. And it just totally amazed me that this man couldn't go in there and buy a cup of coffee just because of the color of his skin. So we bought him a cup of coffee.
Wow.
But
That's eye-opening for a kid from Montana, right?
absolutely it is. We had a colored family in Lewistown. He had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and the boy was either a year ahead of me or a year behind me in school. But I saw him all the time. And the father he had his own little mechanic shop, and he was a very good mechanic and very cheap. And he made a living there, and I never saw, the only racism I saw growing up was against myself, because I am a half-breed Indian, and Montana treats, to this day, they treat the American Indian like the Southerners treated the colored folks. Mm-hmm. And I had 4 strikes against me growing up in Lewistown. I was a half-breed Indian. Then, just to make it worse, we were poorer than the poor. And the 3rd strike was I was Roman Catholic. And the 4th strike was that I wore huge, thick glasses. So I was, you know, it was almost impossible for the other kids not to pick on me.
Right.
And children can be the cruelest things in the world. Almost all of our clothing, of myself, my 7 brothers, my 2 sisters, came from the basement of St. Leo's. That, you know, the more well-off people in town, or, you know, they donate the stuff to St. Leo's, and St. Leo's would give it to families like us. And I would Mom would go down and pick stuff out, and bring it home. One day I got a new shirt. Man, it was nice, just looked like brand new. The kid had just outgrown it. And I put it on. Man, I felt 10 feet tall, I walk into school, and about the second person I meet is the boy who owned the shirt prior to me. Oh, look at him. He's wearing my old shirt. But to get back to Vietnam, the two brothers below me, Jerry and Melvin, had enlisted in the Army as soon as they could. Melvin was just barely 17, and they couldn't send him to Vietnam, so they sent him to Germany until he was old enough to go to Vietnam.
Now you're the older brother. Is this
Yes.
worrying you?
Pardon?
Does this worry you to see your two younger brothers go into the Army?
Yes,
Okay.
it did. Because both of my parents were depression children. They were youngsters in the depression, and things were, and therefore they had a little different life set of values, and they were kind of a generation behind the rest of the world at that time. And big families, because they were Roman Catholic, and everybody has a job to do. The children, we all have a job to do, and we did them. And we moved up to the mountains and lived up in the mountains in a log cabin that my dad and I built. No running water, no electricity. We lived up there for a little over 3 years, and during that time, it was actually one of the happiest times of my life, because I had enough to eat almost all the time, because we had a huge garden. My father planted a huge garden, and of course, kids got to take care of it, weed it and everything, water it. But we grew corn and potatoes, tomatoes, I don't know what else, and we'd eat it when it was fresh, and we had a big old pressure cooker, and we'd set it on a stove and get it going, and then we'd can the vegetables and store them, and that way we'd have vegetable stuff in the winter. My father acquired an old 22 single shot rifle about that long with a broken stock that would only shoot shorts. At that time, 22 came in 22 short, 22 long, and the one they have today, whatever it is. But this little rifle would only shoot shorts. And my father bought it and taught me to shoot it. And then I would go down hunting. I would hunt rabbits and quail and anything else I saw that I thought was edible. And then the second winter we were up there, my father took me deer hunting and taught me to hunt. And the American Indian is the original warden of nature, of recycling and such. One of the things that my father taught me was that when you are hunting for deer, you do not shoot bucks. You do not shoot wet does. You do not shoot fawns. You shoot one thing and one thing only, and that is the dry doe. She's older. She can no longer have babies. Her only asset to her herd is she's the sentry, she's a guard. But by shooting the dry doe, you don't do any major ecological impact on the deer population. And my father he taught me to shoot deer with a scoped 22. And when he thought I was ready, it just became my job. And my job, one of my jobs, and that was to keep deer meat. And we had deer meat all the time. And the game wardens would come up every once in a while, just shake their head, go on back. But
So let's talk about, when did you get to Vietnam the first time?
okay, I got to Vietnam in, now I need to take a quick look here at my 214s to be absolutely positive that I've got my dates right. But it was August of 1966 that
So August of '66. Where did you come to, and where did you? What are your first impressions of Vietnam?
we come on the cargo ship, and we came up. We stopped in Manila. We stopped in Japan and went through the canal and went up river, up the Saigon River into Saigon, and docked on the docks in Saigon.
About how long did that take you, do you recall?
Yes, actually it took about 2 months.
2 months. That's a long time to be on a ship with not a lot, I imagine not a lot to do on ship?
Nope.
How do
Played a lot of poker.
So you got good at poker, and you get to Saigon, then what happens?
We come on board. We docked, okay, we docked in Saigon, and then and you wanna know what my first impressions were.
Yep.
It smelled bad to me. To this day, I can't stand to be around an ocean very long because of the smell. And it was hot, it was muggy, and I saw something moving out on the dock. It was night, and I saw something moving. I looked, and I thought it was a dog. And so I watched it for a couple of minutes, and then it kind of come out and crossed into a little area of light. And it was a rat. The size of a small dog. It was about almost 2 feet long, its body. And it was about 8, maybe 10 inches thick. And it wasn't alone. But we pulled into the dock. We started offloading our equipment. And the first 2 things that come off were a tractor trailer, tractor trailer. And we loaded Connexes on it, I think it was. And the Yazanoski, who would ride before we did with the battalion, who went over on a different ship. And they'd already been there and scouted everything out and everything, and we were temporarily assigned Long Ben. And Yazanoski comes up to me and he hands me this map, and he says, "You're here, you go this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, you get on this highway and you go up here and then you turn right and you're Long Ben." I said, "Okay." I said, "When does the convoy leave?" He says, "There is no convoy." He says, "You leave as soon as it gets loaded." He said, "When you get up there, you unhook from the trailer, the loaded trailer. There will be an empty trailer up there. You pick it up, you go over to the fuel bladder, big old rubber bladders full of diesel fuel. You fuel up your truck, check it out, go back down with the empty, back it into place, unhook it, pick up a loader and do it again." The third night that I was there, well, a 5-ton tractor trailer The tractor is a tandem axle, dually all-wheel drive, diesel motored outfit. And they don't have much of a cab, and they're not noise resistant at all. So you don't see, you don't hear anything. And the third night, I was running at night, just a little before daylight. It was just about daylight when I pulled in Long Bend. I unhooked my trailer. I went over, hooked up the empty, went over to the fuel bladder, and started fueling the truck. And I was walking around it, and I just happened to glance up at the driver's door. And about 4 inches behind the edge of the door was a bullet hole. I had absolutely no idea where it happened. It happened on that trip. But some little BC out there somewhere took a shot at me. And fortunately, it missed. But I looked at that, and I guess that was the instant that I faced my mortality, because for whatever reason, if that had been 10 inches further forward, it would have went right through the upper part of my hip.
So did your perspective change at that moment?
Absolutely it did.
How? What did you decide then and there? How did your perspective on mortality change? Or how did you act different after that point?
Well, there's another, I faced my mortality. I knew that I could very easily die over there. And I also realized that being Roman Catholic and also believing in Honkin' Tonkin, which is what we Indians call God, and praying and well, I need to back up just a little bit here.
Sure.
When I got to Fort Campbell and was assigned to the heavy equipment platoon of the headquarters company, the NCO, there's one E6, no other NCOs, everything else Spec 5 and below, 22 Spec 5s. But Sergeant Yazanowski was a Korean War veteran. He was he was an old Army Staff Sergeant. 2 daughters. And he was old. He was 34, 35.
Ancient, huh?
Yeah, he's getting ready to retire. But we had 2 men in the battalion with combat experience. Yazanowski and First Sergeant Helms were Korean War veterans. And Yazanowski he kind of took me under his wing a little bit. I guess I looked upon him as a substitute father. And the fact that he had combat experience made me admire and respect him and want to learn from him. And I figured that, he was just about my best bet of surviving. So I just religiously watched him and did everything the way he did. And on December 2nd of 1966, Sergeant Yazanowski was sent. We had a little unit of guys running part of a crusher up a little north of us. And at that time, from Long Bend north, you convoyed. And Sergeant Yazanowski he had the payroll and the mail for the guys up there. And he was on a track on a PC. He's riding on a PC, and they got hit, and they blew up a truck in the front of the convoy with a mine, with a buried bomb, one of ours, and then they opened up on the convoy from both sides. And we went over there with TOE equipment, which meant that we had M14 rifles, which civilian is a .308 Winchester civilian. And Yazanowski jumped off the track and ran out into the jungle where the fire was coming from. And he found a clearing, and he laid down on the side of the clearing and started shooting the VC. I was on KP. I looked up and I saw this huge black column of smoke rising up. And then the armor started heading out. And I just had this feeling. Anyway, after everything was done, they found Yaslowski dead with a bullet between his eyes. 16 dead VC around him. The VC did not touch Yaslowski. They did not take his rifle. They didn't take anything. They left him lay right where he died. And at that point, my world suddenly become very small. Yaslowski was posthumously awarded a Silver Star. But the man that I was going to follow, that was going to keep me safe, was no longer there. And I looked around at my platoon, at the guys in it, and we had a Lifer Spec 5 that they gave him as his E6 stripe, and he became our platoon sergeant. But I looked at everybody to see who I could follow. There wasn't anybody. And at that time, I developed, or I actually started developing it with a bullet hole in the truck, but with Yaslowski's death and with my appraisal of the people around me, there was no leader. There was no one to follow. So I developed a fatalistic attitude. To those who don't know what a fatalistic attitude is I believe that Onken Tonken, God, has a plan for all of us, and He has a purpose for us, and He will determine my death. And until He decides, until the time comes, I'm going to live, no matter what I do. And I have lived that to this day, my entire life. And so I became the de facto platoon sergeant, I guess you would say, when they'd send us out. And I was always being sent out. Me and Keaton were always out in the field, supporting everybody. And Keaton he was a E5 and I was still an E4, so he would kind of run things, but I would kind of run him, I guess, from behind. But that well, like I said, I lived that fatalistic attitude.
What is so your job as a combat engineer? Tell us a little bit about what that does.
Well, it does a lot of different things, but my particular role was as a crane operator, a lowboy driver, tractor trailer, and a dozer operator. And then in February of 1967, they had invented this thing in Rome, Georgia, and it was called a Rome plow. We got a second here. This Rome, it was called a Rome plow. It was a D7 cat with a modified, well, it was totally modified. It had a rounded canopy on top. It had a huge slanted blade with a skid plate underneath and a razor sharp cutting edge, and it was set at an angle, and it was used for clearing brush. And we'd take it and go through and knock out the vegetation, and then we just cut through it, and you go down through there. It had what we called a stinger on it, which is a knife edge, and in bamboo, up to about a foot thick, and things like that. You could just put that D7, you could put it in float, and the blade would just float over the ground on that skid plate underneath, and the razor sharp blade would be up in the air a little bit, and you go through there and you'd hit something and you'd either cut it off instantly or the dozer would kind of turn and slide and just cut it, and you could cut 2-foot trees with it. And they'd come back and it had what's called a cow catcher on the front of it, and then the canopy was rounded, and they come back and they hit the cow catcher and it flip straight back right on top of you on that canopy and go off to either side. And it was
Is that dangerous? I mean, you're in Long Bin? Are you in the Long Bin area still doing this? Is that where you're clearing?
No, I'm up in the. Well, I did. I used it at Black Horse.
Okay,
We were
so you're way up.
Horse, 11th Armored Cav. We built Black Horse.
Okay.
When the first time I saw Black Horse, we were we convoyed up. I was hauling the dozer. We got up, and it was raining, and those damn Frenchmen, they don't know how to build roads. And it was just a big old mess. And we got up there, and the convoy stopped, and I'm looking around. On the left, there's a rubber plantation. On the right, just scrub jungle. And the lieutenant comes over and he says, unload the dozer, he said, and start clearing that brush back off the road. And so, okay. So, started doing that, and but anyway, like I said,
So were you were you always a target because you were going slow and you were clearing out areas where the enemy could hide, or what? Tell me about what you encountered day in, day out, or was it fairly was it just hot and heavy and a lot of back-breaking work? Tell me a little bit about an average day.
well, I don't know that I had an average day.
Okay.
But I was always in the field. And well, like I say, I kind of become the de facto platoon sergeant. And later on, I realized that this was because I was the best leader of that whole bunch, regardless of the fact that I was only an E4. But I made E5 in March. But in February, when the 4-room plows come into the country, I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can see them, but this is a roam plow. Yeah.
It almost, yeah, it looks like a cross between like a train and a bulldozer from.
Yep.
Okay.
It's actually a D7 bulldozer, and like I said, it's got that canopy. And there's the second one is right there. I don't know if you.
Yeah.
Is it picking this up?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So is it? You were also there during in '68. You were there. You leave in? Did you say around December '68? How your tour was? You did actually 2 tours, correct? Did you do 2 back-to-back tours? Because 65 to '68, did you do? You did 3 tours total, correct?
Yes.
When did your first tour end?
August of '67.
Okay.
But we need to get over to. As usual, I don't. But in the 4-room plows that come into Vietnam, the first 4, we got 2 of them.
Okay.
And of those 2, I got 1 because I was one of the better dozer operators.
Okay.
So I got a plow, and I, broke it in, got used to it around Black Horse here, just pushing jungle back. Well, and then in March of 1967, they kicked off Operation Junction City. a bunch of us were sent out along there and with them, including me and my roam plow. And it was a multi-divisional Operation Junction City. And we went into the Hobo Woods. We were the first round eyes in there since the French left. And there was right up on the fluid border between Vietnam and I think it was Laos, I'm not sure, but anyway, there was a little area there called Preklok, and there was a river running through there, and there was a small hill, and from the top of that hill you could see part of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. You could actually see it with your naked eye. And they, well, my part in it, let's just get back to me, I guess. I was running, I had the roam plow, and they had defoliated the entire area with Agent Orange. But even though it kills that stuff, it's still standing there, and it could still be used as cover. So I would take my roam plow, and I would have two HD-16 bulldozers following me, and I'd clear the jungle, just knock it down, and they would windrow it up, back to what was considered relatively safe, because it built a berm that was hard to cross, and you had a clear area of fire on them. But no mask, no anything. I don't know how much Agent Orange stayed in those things, but
right.
But with that roam plow, I cleared the road back as far as they wanted it, and then we went up and cleared an area to build a C-130 capable airstrip. And then we cleared that little mountain off and set up a Special Forces A-team camp there. And Charlie didn't want us in there. The NVA didn't want us in there. And I had an M60 machine gun, and we had 3-man foxholes with APCs around us. There'd be a foxhole, APC, foxhole, and 3-man foxholes. And myself and my lowboy driver and a guy from the infantry, the three of us would be in the, at night we'd be in the whatever I just said.
Foxhole?
Foxhole, yeah, we're in a foxhole.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my M60, set ready to go. And they hit us with 3 regiments of NBA. And but we had pushed the dozers had pushed that jungle that I'd cleared. They'd pushed it back about 150 yards away from us, and just piled and made a kind of a barricade out of it, about 10, 15 feet tall. And then back where our foxhole, where our defensive positions were, we had enfilade fields of fire, and everything there. And they had to come across that berm of jungle material. So they were massed on the other side of it in 2 positions, and they attacked. And of course, they just throw rope ladders or something up over that stuff so they could come across it. And they come across, and we were 2 minutes. The jets were 2 minutes away, and we had some artillery around that could reach around us, but they hit us. And there was an entire battalion of mechanized infantry. The entire battalion was in that area. They were working out there, protecting us and stuff, and doing search and destroys. And there was a lieutenant colonel there. The battalion commander was there. And as soon as he realized what was going on, he started calling in the air power, and they come in, and they drop napalm all the way around us, about 100 yards out from that pile of jungle, from that jungle berm. They laid napalm about 100 yards away, all the way around it. And then they picked up where the majority of the NDA were, and they came in. There was a Puff Magic Dragon up there with it's got automatic machine guns on it that can cover a football field with bullets in a second, and they had one of them up there. And then the NVA, like I say, they got over the berm, and we could actually see them. And we're well entrenched, and we started killing them. And then they come in again. The air power came in and dropped napalm right on that defensive perimeter we'd built up, that jungle berm. They dropped napalm right on it. So you had Puff the Magic Dragon out there, and then you had a ring of napalm 100 yards out away from the berm, and then the berm itself had napalm. And every time I think of this, I think of Dante's Inferno, because I saw men being burned alive.
And there's fire on all sides.
Yep. I was not in the area that I was in was not one of the major attack points. So we didn't have a lot of, we had some, but we didn't have, like hundreds of them coming across like there was in a couple of the other places. But anyway, the last thing I remembered was I could see those men up there jumping around in that napalm, being burned alive. I could see a few of them that got out of it and were coming toward us. And I was firing my enfilade area across with my M60 machine gun. And my next memory, it's about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm standing with a canteen cup of hot coffee, no helmet, my M14 slung muzzle down, and I'm just sitting there drinking coffee, and there's other guys around me, and we're all just, but I have been under psychiatric care since 1991. I see a psychologist here in Billings, a very good psychologist, an hour a week. I see a psychiatrist here every 6 months, but I have that blank in there, and I don't know that I want to address it. But anyway, there's which I probably didn't know. Yeah, I did. Can I read this?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, this is a book by Tom Carhart, who was an infantry captain in Vietnam, named Battlefront Vietnam.
Okay.
The second battle of Prechlock took place on 10 March, but it was very different from the first. Communist forces launched an all-out attack under cover of darkness against an American fire support base defended by a battalion of mechanized infantry. The 2nd Battalion, Mechanized 2nd Infantry, minus one company, was securing the perimeter of Artillery Fire Support Base 2 on Route 4, again the southeast corner of the Horseshoe Circle, not far from the site of Prechlock 1. Inside the circular wagon train perimeter were 2 artillery batteries and a detachment of U.S. Army engineers. The engineers were building an airstrip and a special forces camp at that location. The perimeter of the fire base was protected by foxholes manned by infantrymen as well as men from the artillery and infantry detachments. Every meters or so was one of the APC carriers with 50 caliber and M60 machine guns dug in. About 10 o'clock, enemy launched a heavy mortar attack. Over the next 30 minutes, literally hundreds of 122, 82, and 60 meter shells fell on the American positions. Then about 10:30, the enemy launched a ground attack with 2 battalions against defensive positions along the eastern sector of the fire base. Positions manned by A Company, 2nd the 2nd. The Americans were well prepared. Artillery from nearby fire support base, as well as that of Prechlock itself, surrounded the perimeter wall of steel. The attack against A Company on the east was intense, recoilless rifle and automatic fire crashing in their defensive positions. 3 APCs were hit by RPGs. Limited attacks were also launched on northeast and southeast, and the enemy's secondary attack came from the southwest. But they only hurled themselves into the teeth of the American defenses and failed in their vain efforts to break through. Over 5,000 rounds of artillery and hundreds of tactical airstrikes. It was early morning hours before the hostile fire had ceased, and the first light maintenance patrols cleared the field of battle. The bodies of 197 enemy dead were recovered. 5 wounded were captured. All members of 2 battalions of the 272nd Regiment, 9th Viet Cong Division. U.S. losses were 3 killed, 38 wounded.
Wow, that is so to have lived through and witnessed that. So so you got that memory gap, and then afterwards, what happened afterwards? Did you finish the job, go home, go back to base camp? What happened after that?
We finished the job. The
airstrip and all of that?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the Special Forces camp. We had a water purification unit set up there. But we finished it. They brought C-130s in. They could land and take off of the airstrip we built. And we did a really good job there. And common or if the enemy left 197 dead and 5 wounded, that means they probably took with them about the same amount of bodies, which is, kind of rule of thumb. But anyway, yeah, we finished the job and went back out, and we were convoying down out of the Hobo Woods, and I'm sitting in my Rome plow with my M60 machine gun set up, and I got my steel pot, my steel vest, pants and boots, and we haven't seen water except drinking water they helicoptered into us. And we'd been out in there for over a month, and we were a pretty grungy looking lot. We were convoying down out of there, and they pull us off to one side a little bit. We're still going, but we've got some of the outfits have to have one set of wheels off the pavement because there's another convoy coming up where we just came out of, and they were all FNGs.
Mm-hmm.
And they were they looked like they'd just come off parade back in the States. The uniforms, beautiful, clean, the boots, everything.
They have no idea what they're going to.
And they watched us as they went by, and we just laughed. We couldn't help it. You just had to laugh.
All right. Did you feel sorry for him or not?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I felt sorry for every soldier who served over there on either side. Like I said, I've been disabled since 1991. Well, the first 5 years, I didn't have any income. I lost my house. I lived with my brother and his wife, and he paid my living expenses because I fought the VA, and I fought in March or April of 1991. I went to a psychiatrist in Reno, Nevada, and he interviewed me for about 2 hours, and he wrote out that I had post-traumatic stress disorder that was 100% disabling. And I was a step-up mine superintendent at a gold mine in Winnemucca, Nevada. I was also the explosives expert. And I got to where we bussed our people back and forth. I had a company pickup I drove, but the workers, the crews were bussed out there. And so I go out early. I have to go out early and inspect the mine, make sure everything's, within safety. And then I go down and I meet the crew and I assign them. Hello, excuse me. Where was I?
So you were in 91. You had 100% disability attributed to PTSD in Vietnam.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about how that's been for you? Because one of the challenges that we've had, not challenges, one of the reasons we've done this project is so people can talk about what the after effects of Vietnam were. How did that manifest itself in your life?
It manifested itself in various different ways. When I got out of the Army in 1975 and went to work in Douglas, Wyoming for an oil field outfit, and I'd been promised a bulldozer that they were buying, and the deal fell through, so I was driving a lowboy. And I went out to the uranium mine at Exxon and applied, and I was accepted as a truck driver. And a lot of the guys, most of the guys, tried to hide their Vietnam experience because there was and still is a bias against Vietnam veterans. I took a different approach. And the two reasons that I used this approach is, number one was self-protection, and number two was a warning. When I went to work for Exxon, they had about 15 of us new hires, and we're all in the room, and each of us stood up and gave a little, little life history, I guess. And I stood up and I said, I'm a 3-tour Vietnam veteran. 10 years in the Army, Staff Sergeant E6. And then I sat down. And I have never hid my Vietnam tours. I am proud of each and every one of them because men like me, like 99% of the Vietnam veterans, we were there either because we had to be or because we wanted to be, for whatever reason. My family has always been extremely patriotic. My father, my father-in-law, and my mother-in-law were all master welders in the shipyards at Bremerton during the war. But being naive, I felt that going to war in defense of my country was the patriotic thing and was the right thing to do. And also, for myself personally, I have always had doubts, I guess, about myself. I didn't really know what I was made of. I didn't know what I was capable of. And war, mano a mano, war is the ultimate test. I went to Vietnam and I served my first tour, and I learned that I was a natural leader, that I was very intelligent, and that somewhere in me, in all probability, my grandfather took scalps. So I'm just barely away from whatever, but I learned what I was capable of. And, well, getting to what I really came down here to talk about is my 3 tours of Vietnam, because I think that I am fairly unique in the fact that I went over in August of 1966, and I came back in August of 1967. And at that period of time, if you were military and you wore your uniform, you could fly standby. And so I came back, and I don't remember if it was Oakland or Seattle. I think it was Oakland. But anyway, I come into Oakland, and I go through the processing, and I put on my uniform, and I go up to the airport. And I'm in full uniform, and I'm walking through the terminal, and there's a bar there, and this guy looks up and he sees me. Hey, come here, I walk in there, and I'm a hero. Now, this is August of 1967. I couldn't buy a drink. I couldn't buy food. They just... And when I got home, it was the same way. It was just, I was a hero. I was a war hero. And another thing that happened to me because of my Vietnam experience is that when I got back, when I come back to the States, I asked to be assigned to Fort Lewis, Washington, which is, because I had a real good friend I was in Vietnam with who was in Seattle. And I went home on a 30-day leave, and things just weren't right. There was something wrong. I went out to my assignment at Fort Lewis. I was a Spec 5. I went to my unit, went to my barracks and everything, and I couldn't fit in that outfit. It just didn't feel right. It wasn't right. I didn't belong there. And I started drinking and fighting, and I pretty well resigned myself to the fact that I was probably going to lose my stripes pretty soon. And in January, my company commander called me in, and he said, didn't you just come back from Vietnam? And I said, yeah. he said, well, he said, I've got orders, a set of orders here for you to go to Vietnam. And he said, I'll just get them canceled. I said, no, sir. I said, please don't do that. I want to go back. And he said, okay.
Why did you want to go? Just because you weren't fitting in over there, over here? Is that why? I mean, help for most of us, and most of the time that we've heard veterans talk, they talk about wanting, getting on that freedom bird and coming home and never looking back, so to speak. But here you are saying, I want to go back, and you had the option not to go.
Because I didn't fit. I didn't fit at home. I didn't fit with my family. I didn't fit with the civilian army at Fort Lewis. I had one friend, a Spec 4 from Chicago. He had a brand new Olds 442 convertible. I had a 62 Pontiac 4-door sedan. And he and I were, and anyway. But I just didn't fit in.
Was it, so you had changed in Vietnam?
Yes.
How,
That or the world had changed.
which do you think it was?
It was me.
And how would you describe, to someone like me, to a guy who didn't know you, you said you came home, you started drinking and maybe fighting some more and you didn't fit in. Those sound like symptoms. What had changed with you, do you think?
I'm not really sure.
Okay, that's a fair.
But the thing that I do know is that I did not fit with my family. I did not fit with my friends. I didn't fit in my community. I got out to my duty station at Fort Lewis, and I didn't fit there. And I was angry all the time. I was just a ball of rage, just, with a million triggers.
That sounds like a dangerous person.
Well, and I was big. I was 6 feet tall. I weighed 210, 212 pounds. And I was strong. I was quick. And I knew how to fight because I'd fought all my life. Because when you got the 4 strikes against you, we talked about earlier there in Lewistown.
Yeah, you were tough. So you shipped back. Now, it's an interesting time then you shipped back, because you shipped back in the beginning of 1968, and that's the Tet Offensive.
That's exactly.
So let's talk about you going back. So they didn't cancel your orders. They
No.
said, okay, you fine, you go back to Vietnam. Let's talk about arriving back in Vietnam. Let's talk about that for a bit.
Well, first of all, we're back now to the individual going over there, not as a battalion. You're you.
Yeah.
That's it. You're going to a new unit. Well, when we got there, we got off the plane there, went over to the repo depot, and the Tet Offensive had just begun. And they come into barracks. And they said, all E5 and above stand up. And then they said, all non-combat veterans sit down. And they took the 10 or 12 of us who were left, and they took me out, and they gave me a section of the perimeter and some FNGs and a rifle. And I guarded the perimeter for a couple of days. Nothing happened, you know, but it just, but they come in there and they got the guys, the guys like me, you know, the E5 and above with combat experience, and they took us out there and they gave us all these FNGs and said, here you are.
And they're coming off wide-eyed, not knowing what the heck just happened,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And anyway, so I spent a few days there at the Repo Depot, and then I get assigned to my unit. And my unit is actually headquartered in Long Bend, although I didn't spend very much time there. I went down to Phu Quoc, where we built a Class 60 bridge across the Saigon River, which, you know, you could run convoys of tanks over it if you wanted to, you know, and just make a straight shot into Saigon. Of course, they blew it up about the second day after we finished it. That's beside the point. But anyway, I got to my unit, and I've got brand new fatigues, nothing on them, you know, anything. And I go, I go there and get in the chow line, get some food, go sit down there. A couple other guys comes down, a couple Spec 5s, and a couple other guys, and they're all, you know, I'm the FND. And so they're giving me the treatment, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine, you know, and I just ride along with it, you know. And then the next day, the same thing again. And then the third day, my uniforms come back. And I've got the combat patch on the right side and my Spec 5s. And I walked in there and I got my tray and I went over and I sat down with them guys. And they just looked at me. And I looked at them and I just laughed. But they sent me down to where we were building that bridge. They gave me a barge with a 60-ton Manitowoc crane on it with 120 feet of boom and 100 feet of leads for a drop hammer, a pile driver. And we would take that barge out and anchor it in the river. and then they would, then they'd put a piece of steel in it, and the engineers would zero it in till you got it exactly where they want it, and then I'd let it down, and then I'd start the pile driver and drive it down until, then you raise it up, put another piece of steel in it, do it again, while you weld it together.
Right.
And then you do it again. And you go down to I can't remember what it is, but there's a formula to support a Class 60 bridge. Each pylon has to go to a holding power, I guess, of whatever it is, and you just keep driving the steel down with that hammer and welding another section on it until it gets to where it takes 50 blows to move an inch or whatever it happens to be.
Right.
And that the 100 feet of leads, you've got a crane with a boom like that, then you get your leads like that. Well, this is 120 feet, and here to here is 100 feet. So the most you can set that down is you can set it down, you can set that 100 foot on the deck, and that's it. That's as far as it'll go. Makes a very, very nice mortar target.
Yeah.
And Charlie would mortars.
So how are you doing? How do you do your job? How are you paying attention to pile driving when people are mortaring you?
Fatalistic attitude.
All right. So even though you're, this is something that we've talked about on these interviews, even though you're doing something like combat engineering, driving a dozer, pile driver, a crane, anything like that, you're still a target. Someone's always shooting at you. It's not like you're not just back somewhere doing these jobs.
No.
Yeah. Is there any defense when that starts happening? Is there any defense you have? I mean, other than get out, stop. Do you have artillery or anyone with you that can return fire, or what do you guys do when that happens?
There's almost always infantry or armor support around us because we're working for them.
Sure.
We're doing stuff
Yeah.
for them, and they in turn, like this Prucklock thing, we got an entire battalion of Mac infantry protecting us. That's their entire job is to protect us.
Did they ever hit the crane? Did they ever hit the target? With mortar, did they ever hit your 100 foot crane?
No. But one night, they mortared us a little better than they normally did. And we had a big old ditch digger.
Mm-hmm.
And you could dig a ditch this wide and as deep as you wanted it. So, and we were living we had tents with wood frames and sandbags.
Right. Yep.
And then we had the ditch to get into, and we got hit one night, and the first one landed just a little tiny bit short of us, and when it went off, it woke me up, and I grabbed my rifle and ran outside and fell in that trench. The next mortar was a direct hit on the hooch next to mine. And then we were being protected by Vietnamese soldiers.
ARVN soldiers?
ARVNs. Before the mortar attack, just at dark, something wasn't right, and I started looking around a little bit, and I walked over to the defensive perimeter that the ARVN soldiers were stationed at to protect us. There wasn't anybody there. So my platoon sergeant was an E7 with Korean experience. And I went over there and I told him, I said, the ARVNs are gone. And I said, the ARVNs are gone. There's nobody out there. And he I don't know what he did. I just turned around and walked off because I had done my job.
Right. So that didn't help then. Obviously, that the ARVNs had gone and kind of left you guys completely defenseless.
And then come the mortars. Then at that time, I had a M1 carbine, 30 caliber, with 3 or 4 magazines and a bunch of ammo that my brother Jerry had brought down to me. And, because I never had much luck with M16s. My favorite was the M60 machine gun. My favorite rifle was the M14. But that little 30 was a nice little. But they put in, I think, 2 more mortars. One went out into the river and the other one went wide, and then it stopped. And I got up out of the trench and I glanced at the hooch next to me, and I didn't see where there was anything I could do for any of them, so I grabbed a couple magazines for that M1 and I went up on the approach, the bridge approach, which is built there. And I went up there and I got down and hunkered up, looked over, and there was a piece of concrete wall on one side of it, and I got right up beside that and I peek around the corner. And about 15 minutes, I saw him coming. So I started shooting. and it was just a little bitty probe, you know, and they just,
Bled back.
yeah, they just DD'd. But anyway, after Tet, when Martin Luther King and Kennedy were killed, America changed, the world changed, the military changed.
In what way? What do you mean by that?
The racism raised its ugly little head a little higher, especially in Vietnam in the military. The blacks started to congregate among themselves and exclude everybody else, which is not normal in a combat zone. In a combat zone, your life depends on the man next to you. And if you're worried about the color of his skin, one of you don't belong there. And you know which one doesn't belong there. But it just, you know, there's nothing truly overt, but a lot of the draftees, they become belligerent and
So you think that that's because of the anti-war sentiment and the political sentiment at home? They're coming over. Is that what you're suggesting, that they're coming home? They're coming over with a different attitude.
they're coming over with a different attitude, and when they get home, do they have one hell of a surprise coming. I told you how they treated me in August of '67 when I come back.
How did they treat you? Because you came home then in December of '68, correct?
November, actually.
November of '68. So how did they treat you then? Because that's a lot different.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, the airlines, the same policy still applied. If you wanted to fly standby, you had to wear your uniform. Well, I just come back from Vietnam, working daylight to dark 7 days a week. I'm 6 feet tall. I weigh 212 pounds. I can press 350. And I'm fast, and I'm mean, and I know how to fight. I've fought all my life. I got a shorter haircut than I got right now.
Right.
I keep my hat on because it's a bad haircut. But they told us when they processed us out, they said that, you know, that they're not, the American public isn't being very nice to the Vietnam veteran. That's what they told us. I said, okay, you know, well, I told you about the little speech I gave at Exxon.
Yeah.
Well, I put my full uniform on. And like I said, I just come back and I'm tanned, you know.
Right.
And I walked into, I think it was Oakland International, to Indy Airport. And people look at me, but nobody says anything. And then I've got ears, or had ears like a cat. And I could smell. I could actually smell the Vietnamese. they were within about 50 or 100 feet of me without wind. If they were, the wind was blowing from them to me, I could smell them at 200 yards. And I could hear I had unbelievable hearing. And I'm walking through the airport, heading up to the terminal. There's a bunch of hippies up there, you know, boys and girls.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them spots me coming toward them, you know, and they start talking about me. And I'm already close enough that I can hear them, although you would think it was damn near impossible. You know, shit, I'm 100 and some feet away from them. But I hear them talking. Oh, look at that big bastard. Fucking baby killing son of a bitch, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how many women he raped over there. Just, you know, and the boys were doing most of it. The girls were doing a little bit. And then when they figured that I was close to hearing range, the boys quit talking and the girls started in. And when I got close enough that they knew I could hear them, they all just quit talking. They just stood there staring at me. And I walked up and I stopped. And I did a military right angle. And I stood there at attention and stared at him. They left. They never said a word. They left. Because at that point in time, there were, I think there was 8 boys and 4 girls or 5 girls, something like that. And at that point in time, this ball of rage, I probably could have whipped all of them right then and there and hurt them, because I got to where when I come back from Vietnam in '67, I had fought all my life. But when I came back in '67, my fighting changed. Before I had fought for, you know, self-defense and on, you know, a little bullying maybe, you know. But when I come back in '67, if I got in a fight, I fought to hurt. And that's exactly what I did, is I hurt people. And so, anyway, there's the hippies. Okay, they're over and done with. I'm going up and I get my ticket. And I go in the bar and nobody offers to buy me a drink.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody will come sit by me, you know, and everything. I'm sitting there thinking about that. Oh, and I had a lot of trouble in my unit. I didn't fit in there either.
So even when you go back, you didn't fit in?
I didn't fit in.
Why?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've been working on that since '91, I guess.
Okay, fair enough.
With professional help. and we still don't know.
Yeah.
But when I got back home, 68, what the hell did I do then? I dinged around for a while, and then I went to work for Anaconda Copper, I guess it was at the Berkeley Pit. I run dozer in the
Yeah.
Berkeley Pit for over a year. And I lived with my sister and my brother-in-law and their kids. And I didn't fit in anywhere. And when I was running I usually ran a Ripper Cat, but sometimes I'd run a cleanup dozer for a shovel. You know, every shovel has a cleanup dozer to keep the stuff out of the way so the trucks can get in. And a lot of times something would break down, and that was a union job, so you know and a lot of times we just didn't have anything to do. You know, I'd just go up and shovel, and me and the shovel operator and the oiler, you know, we'd sit there and bullshit. And one guy up there, he's 6'5", about 270, about the same age I was. Big, mean, rough bastard. And he is the only guy up there, he's the only man up there that I felt anything with. You know, because he was just a big me. And he was also a non-vet, just like I was. But
So you go twice.
yep,
And then you decide a third time to go. I mean, in now things are really different, right? 70 to 71. The war is a lot different than in 1965. Let's talk about why you decided to go on that third tour and what had changed in compared to when you were over there in 65 or 66.
well, okay, to start with, I got out of the Army in November of 68. I became a civilian.
Yeah.
Like I said, I had trouble with, I didn't fit in with that unit at all. You know, I didn't fit in anywhere. And the way I dealt with it was drinking and fighting,
Yeah.
which is not conducive to harmony, I guess. But there was there at Butte, they had this changing room, and they gave you a basket on a chain. It went up to the ceiling and down over and you put your stuff in there and got into your work clothes, and then you had to padlock it, and then you have the key. And of course they got somebody in there watching all the time. But so then then we go out and work, and running the dozer, most of them with ropes on them, but no, with steel protectives called ropes, canopies, but no cabs on some of them. And a dirty, dirty job. So you come back and you strip off your grungies and go hit the shower. You come back to your key, get dressed. Well, there's an old guy, a real old guy, that's got the basket right next to me. And I don't know what he did, but we just happened to talk one night, while we were getting dressed, I guess. Yeah, we were both getting dressed. We just come out of the shower. And he said that he's about a month away from retirement. And I asked him, I said, how they treating you on that? And he said he'd been there for 40 some years, almost 50 years. And I can't remember now what his retirement was going to be, but it was going to be pretty feeble. And he'd worked there for damn near 50 years. And I thought about that. And then I'd get up there in that shovel and I'd talk with that operator and the oiler. And the oiler was married to a school teacher. And so, we had a lot of, they were both pretty sharp guys. And I guess I got along with them too. I tolerated them. But we get up there and talk, and then I got that letter from the Department of the Army. And I read it, and I thought about it, and I talked to the folks, and I talked to the guys up in the shovel. And I had 3 years active, 2 years inactive, so I had 5 years in already. I could go back in at my same rank, and I thought it said my same data rank. And it didn't, and that cost me that E6 rate we were talking about earlier. But anyway, I think about it, and I thought, well, Jesus, and I don't fit anywhere. And I'm drinking, I'm fighting, wrecking cars, and so like I said, I talked to a few people. I said, hell, so I went down and re-enlisted. Choice of duty station, Vietnam. Took the physical, sent me to Fort Lewis, qualified me again on the M16, gave me all my shots and stuff, sent me back to the norm.
What was it like going there a third time?
Totally different.
In what way?
It was extremely close to being stateside Army. only real difference was that, what the hell am I trying to say? We had a job to do. We had work every day. We had good, we were building stuff, which I get, my favorite thing in the world is taking a triple shank Ripper D10 or big Fiat Allison, just ripping and building, tearing mountains down, filling holes in, and I've got a knack for it. I've got the ability to, or used to have the ability that I go out and I could look at a piece of ground and I could visualize what I wanted it to be. I could visualize it, and then I could just go from there.
Go do it. So you got there, and were you still combat engineering? Did you same MOS?
Yep.
Okay.
Crane operator.
And doing all of that, and you continued to do that, and yet the Army had changed, and you say it became much more like stateside, so does that mean it had been built up more, I mean, you were over building Black Horse in 66, and now you're there 70, 71, and it's already been built up. That's 6 years later. Completely different.
Yep, totally different.
So it didn't quite fit in there either? That must have been kind of disappointing. You go over there thinking, maybe let's get back to what
It was extremely disappointing.
Now you signed up for it, was it a 4-year hitch because you were out in 75?
No, it was a 3-year hitch.
Okay.
I re-enlisted for 3 years. I went to Vietnam, 70, 71. I came back and I had applied to be a drill instructor.
Okay.
Preferably at Fort Lewis. And again, as happens to me, I went home on leave, no orders, 30 days about up, I call, no orders, take another 2 weeks, I take 2 weeks, I call, no orders. I said, well, Jesus, I don't want to take any more leave. So anyway, 2 days later, I get orders to report to White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. And I get down there and things were totally different. But they were a little better. I still didn't fit in, but there were enough of my fellow soldiers and people around that I almost fit in.
Okay.
And no, wait a minute. That's not exactly. What happened is I got orders to go to that that big army base right down there by White Sands.
Not Ford.
No, it's I can't think of it. But anyway, I got orders to go there. And I got down there and I piddled around a couple days, and then they, nothing. And then they give me the orders to go to White Sands. But I got to White Sands, and they sent me to a range recovery unit, and bless the world, they actually work. They've got a job. Every day you go out and you do a job, which is, well, to break into that a second, my coping mechanism after I decided that the fighting and the drinking were just gonna get me where I didn't want to be, my coping mechanism became workaholic. And so White Sands just fitted me just like that, because we're a range recovery unit. They'd shoot this classified stuff out there. You had to have a secret clearance even to be in the unit. So anyway, I got my clearance and I went in there, and, we had this building, we had some civilians around there. We had 2 helicopters, and we had 4 or 5 3/4-ton Dodge 4-wheel drives with big sand tires on them, and yellow hoods, and a number on the top of the cab, and we had radio communication with the base and with the helicopters. And we go out, the helicopters go out there and find whatever, try to find, like one thing I remember is, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was about this big around, about this long, and it went into the sand, it went into at an angle, and I hit it with a backhoe. I think it was 27 feet down. Like I say, I don't know what it was, but and there was that little bit of excitement in there too, because some of that stuff was ordnance.
Right.
And some of it hadn't gone off.
Right.
But we also had an EOD team.
Right.
But that's about as close as I had come to fitting back into anything, because a lot of the guys around me were combat vets, just like me. I was an E5. We had some E6s, E7s, but we also had a bunch of E3s and 4s, So I was in there, and I was, I was an extremely good operator. I just, it's unnatural ability I had that I could watch somebody run something, then I could get up there and do the same damn thing. And I could, whenever I got a machine that was different, I'd experiment with it and see, if it would do this better this way or what, and on and on. But anyway, we had the job that we did, and I pretty well quit fighting. I still do a little drinking. Then I got married. She had 2 kids. I bought a 68 GTX, Plymouth GTX 440 Magnum, and turned it into a super stock race car. I bought a brand new 72 Duster 340 4-speed. Put a set of gears in it, headers, pinion snubber, and raced it in stock. I raced it about 4 different strips around there.
Hmm. So that became your new kind of outlet.
Yeah, because I'd raced all my life.
Right. How did you talk about PTSD? How did you first start? I mean, was PTSD evident from the time you got back to the States, or was the drinking and the fighting just part of that experience?
Part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was well, I knew there was something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I come back in '67, the world had changed.
Yeah. Did family and friends notice?
My family and I aren't very close.
Okay.
There's some stuff in there that I'm not going to get into, but one thing, my older sister married a guy from around Lewistown there. Gordon Casera. And he kind of, I'd borrow his car and stuff, he'd let me borrow his car and, stuff like that, give me a few bucks once in a while. Then when I went up to the Berkeley Pit and Butte, I lived with Gordon and my sister. I already said that. But about a year ago, he called me, and he was one of the few people who was close enough to me and objective enough. And I asked him, I said, how did I change? I said, did I change? He said, yes. I said, how did I change? And, he didn't really, he wouldn't get real specific, but he told me that I had definitely changed. And I kept meaning to call him back, talk to him again, and he died a couple months ago. Anyway, that's...
Yeah. When you look back on Vietnam, on the war, it's now been 50 years since you went through boot camp. How do you see Vietnam today versus, and it could be different, it could be the same?
I think it's for the worse. I think that in a better world, we would never have got in that war to start with. In the next better world, we would have eliminated the NBA and its leadership and consolidated Vietnam under democratic principles. In the world we live in today, it's pretty much a moot point. But we lost a couple of guys in 71. We had two guys in a tractor trailer and this little rickety bridge, and they were going across it. And Charlie had a mine under it, but they got about middle of it. Down they went. We had to go out there. I had to go out there and pick them up out of there. They were still in the cab. Go out there and take that crane and pick all that stuff up out of there. But going back to my fatalistic attitude here for just a second, we were, it was Christmas of 1966, and we were coming down out of somewhere with the 11th Armored Cav, and it was the 24th of December, and there's this little stupid little bridge that we had the convoy across, and Charlie mined it, and he waited until an AVLB was on it. It's like a tank with a bridge on it. Double or triple bridge at the hydraulic, it goes out, it'll scan across. Which if they'd blown that bridge, it could have repaired, it could have just set that down, we'd gone on the way. But Charlie waited until it was on it, and he set it off, down it went. And half of the convoy is on that side, and the other half's on this side. And so they come up to me, and I unload my dozer, and I go over there, and I sitting there looking, and they got infantry guys diving into the water there because they had ammo, hand grenades, bullets, flares, all on the front of that damn thing. When it went in, all that stuff just went, and those guys were diving down there,
Trying to get it,
yeah, trying to get them out of there. When they figured they had most of them out, I went in there with a dozer and I cut the other side off enough, and then I dozed in front of it to where I could get the cat in there and get it under the front part of the bridge and raise it up. And then they had a tank retriever up on there, and they hooked onto the back of it, but they couldn't pull it. So that's when I went in there and cut that out of there, and God knows how many or what ordnance was in there that I was running over. And I went in there and picked it up, and I got it up enough to where they could had no force to pull out. But, you know, they told me that there was still stuff down there. What the hell? I cleared a minefield at Preclock, an old French minefield, with my Rome plow. I just ran back and forth over it with the blade floated. And two blew up. One under the track and one under the cat itself.
Didn't do anything?
Didn't do a thing. They were just anti-personnel mines.
Right.
But, you know,
Did that scare you running a Rome plow over at in a minefield? No.
nope. Already had the attitude.
Right. Yeah.
And then, you know, made absolutely no difference.
Don't mean nothing.
Well, actually it did, because I figured I probably saved several lives, because if they had to go in there and clear that
Right.
by hand, you know, that's all. EOD is when I was running that gold mine in Mojave, California, I had a California blasting license, and I've gone through several explosives courses with the Army and civilian life. But 70-71 was a lot different. We had we had Vietnamese crews that worked for us, and they were all out there, you know, and it was just, you know.
Because that was the Vietnamization. That's
Yep.
that was the policy. So.
Right. And we were out there, and we'd have usually GIs would be running the equipment, and the little guys would be doing all the manual labor and stuff, you know.
Right.
And, you know, and I had a squad sometimes. Sometimes I had a whole damn platoon, and we'd go out, we'd do, you know, whatever it was needed to be done, you know.
Right.
And, you know, I had one incident where this had this FNG, and he had an attitude problem, and he was my flag man. Because we were putting in a culvert,
Okay.
you know, and he was the flag man, you know, and here come this little moped with 2 Arvins on it, and he waves at them to stop, and they don't stop, so when they go by him, he just knocks the back one off the bike. And the Arvin comes up, pulls his goddamn rifle out, and I walked up there, and I looked at him, looked at the Arvin. I just looked at him, and people say there's something in my eyes sometimes, I don't know, but I just reached up and put my finger on the muzzle of his rifle and pulled it away. Then I got one of my Vietnamese guys to, you know, apologize and everything, you know, because, you know, it was, you know, well, the kid never should have hit him.
Right.
You know, I mean, why'd he do that? You know, just like I said, he had an attitude problem. But I just, you know,
Yeah. What do you, when you look, when people look back on these interviews that we've been doing, Ernie, what do you hope that people remember about Vietnam?
well, what I would really hope that they will learn from listening to us that we were not and are not we were patriots. Most of them were draftees. I went the first time to defend my country and to find out what I was made of. And but the Vietnam veteran is an extremely unique soldier. The military, which in the past had depended so much on esprit de corps and morale, the World War II veterans to this day hold reunions because they were all in it together for extended periods of time. For reasons that I have never completely understood, when in the Vietnam War, somebody, McNamara or the Pentagon, or somebody decided that it would be better to just replace individuals. Well, how do you replace them? Well, okay, the ETS out, so you got an opening. You send a guy in there. Where do you get him from? Out of AIT in the States. Well, you do that for a little while. And what you end up with is you end up with a bunch of short-timers, guys that got a month or less to go, you know, before they could leave, you know. And their main focus is to protect themselves. You have the soldiers, I guess it's as good a word as any. The guys in the middle, the experienced guys. Then you got the FNGs. You can't trust an FNG. You don't know what he's going to do. You've got to train him. So what you end up with is a company or a battalion or a division or a platoon or squad of individuals with contrary reasons for, the short timer's looking out for himself. He's not looking out for me. He's not looking out for the FNG. Me, I've got to watch the short timer. I've got to train the FNG, and I got to do the work I'm supposed to do. And my first tour, I went over with my entire battalion. That was one of the rare ways that we went to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. The second time I went over by myself on an airplane with a load of mostly new guys. The third time, same thing. Going in, but you go into a unit, and of course I was already established because I made sure I had my combat patch on the right side all the time. That's the first thing I put on my uniforms, because that tells them that I'm not an FNG. But the experimentation that makes the Vietnam veteran so unique is, number one, is that changing it to that idiotic 12-month tour of duty, because they totally destroyed the esprit de corps of the military, as far as I can tell. The Vietnam veteran was forced to be a loner. His life depended on it. A lot of us, most of us, became loners. Those of us who, I've only had one marriage, but I know a lot of the guys that had 7 or 8 different marriages, and just, it just don't work because of that. But they made loners out of us. They made us alone. They wouldn't let us fit in. They treated us like we lost the war. We disgraced armed forces. That's not true. We did our duty. I did my duty 3 times, and I'm proud of every minute of it. I did a few things I shouldn't have done. I didn't do a few things I should have done. But I am proud of my service. And I think every Vietnam veteran should be honored. And the discrimination against us, and it's out there, and it has been, and it still is, hopefully some of it will go away because of what we are telling you guys. Because there's not a lot of difference. There's no difference between me and a World War II veteran, except that they experimented with me. They destroyed the esprit de corps, and then, in their great infinite wisdom, they sent us into battle with unproven weapons. And the reasoning behind it doesn't hold water if one is aware that when the Vietnam War started, the U.S. Army had millions of M1 and M2 .30 caliber carbines, which were proven in World War II in the Philippines. In fact, we armed the Vietnamese with them. And when I got my hands on one, I kept it until I left. And then I gave it to the guy that I thought could use it the most. The M16 of today is a far, far better tool. But how many lives did it cost?
So, we've talked for, well, more than 3 hours. What, have I missed anything that needs to be said in this interview for you, Ernie? You know your life better than I do.
Well, my Vietnam experience made me who I am today and who I was. When I got out of the military on a hardship discharge in 1975, I went up Douglas, Wyoming, went to work in the oil fields. Then I moved into open pit mining, and starting as a truck driver, I rose up to a mine superintendent. And when the PTSD got too bad to let me work anymore, I was the step-up superintendent of a $4 billion gold mine in Winnemucca, Nevada. And I got that way because my coping mechanism became being a workaholic. And but I think that I would hope that you would show more compassion and more understanding of the Vietnam veteran and why he is the way he is. Because the Vietnam veteran is unique in the fact that he was experimented on in war. And I think it was wrong. I think our government was wrong to do it. I believe our government was wrong to be involved in that war to start with. But put the blame where it belongs, on the leadership of this country. Don't put it on me because I did what my government wanted me to do. And I did a good job of it, and I'm proud of it.
Well, I want to say I couldn't say it better than that. In fact, a lot of the soldiers have said similar things, but you said it succinctly. And so, Ernie, I want to say thank you. Thank you for coming in here and sharing your story. That takes bravery. And I think to anybody who's been listening, to hear that we have a soldier who went over there on for three different tours, I thank you for your service, and I thank you for coming back and sharing it, and I thank you for what you did, because you were answering the call. This has been Daryl Ehrlich with Ernie LaFountain. It is November 23rd, 2015. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening.